stone and steel and wood and wire, and change two things to one. They are languages and letters, they are poetry and all. They are love and understanding, and they're other than all. They are languages and letters, they are poetry and all. They are love and understanding, and they're other than all. There are canyons, they are yawning in the night. They are rank and bitter anger, they are all devoid of light. They are fear and blind suspicion, they are apathy and pride. They are dark and soul foreboding, and they're oh so very wide. They are fear and blind suspicion, they are apathy and pride. They are dark and soul foreboding, and they're oh so very wide. Let us build a bridge of music, let us cross this little song. Let us span another canyon, let us write another dawn. Oh, and if someone should ask us where we're up and bound today, we will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. Oh, and if someone should ask us where we're up and bound today, we will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. We will tell them building bridges.
We will tell them building bridges and be off and on our way. Thank you, Bill Staines, for letting us use the song Bridges on Bridges Programming. Welcome to World Call In. You're listening to Bridges Programming, World Call In. This is Wednesday this is Wednesday, and this is a live program. My name is Jeff Beller. With me is Susan Comont and Dennis Carius. Hello, Dennis. And we have a guest sitting here, and her name is Ann Coffey, and she just walked in the door, and we said, would you like to talk about terrorism? And she has her own opinions, and I have my opinion, and all humanity has their own stupid opinions, but we all have our own opinion on what creates it. But we are sponsored by the Human Renewable Energy Measure. I'm going to go give you if Dennis, if you're online, anybody else out there, you can go right online now and meet our special guest who's been around a little bit, and she understands what's maybe the cause of what's happening now. So we're looking at what's going down. Human Renewable Energy Measure is something that we want to say that every human being in the world should work about an hour a day. You got to redefine work. A mother works a lot more than an hour a day for their basic needs met, not their wants. And once you work an hour a day, you'd have your education, food, and shelter. That gives you 11 hours to do other things. Susan and I were talking this morning. Oh, by the way, this is Ann Coffey and her little puppy right there. And Dennis, if you want to see Ann, you can go online and see Ann right now if you'd like.
Good. Okay, I'll try to do that.
Okay, and because right now we're live, and Susan was we're not looking, and actually a lot of people now don't have the freedom we have, and I don't mean freedom like to speak, because we're really stifled by speech in this country, just by the cost of having free speech. Like we're doing the show great, so maybe we have 5,000-6,000 people hitting this program, but for 6 billion people and what's going on in the mainstream media is that they want to go ahead and get the terrorists, even Bernie Sanders saying we have to get them. The reality is what's creating terrorism, and that's what we're talking about today. Why is there such a thing as terrorism? What is creating the frustration that makes people who can afford the time to want to take down not just the United States, but the free market? And the free market isn't really free. It's creating slavery. Now, I want to get Ann's comment on this, but The Human Renewable Energy Measure, something you don't join, you don't put money into. If you can understand that all humanity has to have their basic needs met, their education, food, and shelter, without going into slavery for 1 hour a day, all you have to do, and we'll tell you over and over again on this program at least 2 more times, all we ask you to do is understand what we're talking about and make this a conversation in your church groups. If you're religious, if you're not religious, go to a gin mill and talk about why don't every human being have their basic needs met. It's not those people. It's not the Arabs or the Jews or the Hispanics or the blacks it's not those people. Those people, you and I, are created because of 5,000 years of an economic system that puts us all into slavery. Okay, Dennis, you're on. What do you think? What's creating slavery?
Wow, this is very interesting. I think all of this, what we call terrorism, I put it in quotes, this terrorism is going to end when there's something called peak oil. When the oil peaks out over in the Middle East, then we don't have to take out a democratically elected leader like we did in Iran and put the Shah of Iran in there and then, start getting people upset. Saudi Arabia is number 6 on the list of dictatorships in the whole world, and they get most of their weapons from countries like us, and then we get a good price on oil. But just imagine in this country, if our president was taken out by another country and replaced by some dictator who would, give what's under the ground to that country over there, we wouldn't be happy here either. So when we say those people are terrorists, I think it'll end when that oil peaks out.
Well, Dennis, I don't know about that, because if we don't need oil, we're going to need cell phone things for our cell phones, battery stuff. We're going to need certain kinds of other energies. We're going to need silicon. We go for our solar panels. We're going to need product, and that product requires the way the system's set up, money, right? So you're back to the same problem, where the economic system is creating the problem, is it not?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I think one of the main creations of this problem is something called greed, G-R-E.
Okay, isn't greed just... Dennis, you and I have a lot more money than most people that are poor, that we consider poor. So aren't we greedy?
Well, you could say a 3-year-old is greedy.
No, we can't, because a 3-year-old doesn't... A 3-year-old, if they eat food, is not greedy. Greed is an emotion. And just because I'm more ambitious than someone doesn't make me greedy. It makes me someone who likes to work. The person sitting next to me is a worker. And I want to ask you a question. What do you think the problem is? Why do you think we have terrorism around the world? Not just here. They blow up France. They're blowing up Brussels. They blow up all over the world. It's not just here. So it's not just people those people. It's all over the world. So they're trying to take down something that is not. It's not the United States they're trying to take down. They're trying to take down the economic system. And if we all feel as though the economic system is putting us into slavery, no?
The lust and love for material things and for power has always been here, ever since the cavemen who walked around supposedly with big clubs in their hands. Now, with ISIS and groups like that, they've grown up in total ignorance. They've grown up poor, sick. Their longevity is shorter, much shorter than ours. And they think that by having power and killing off the people that have some power and have food to eat and medical care, that's going to help them. And it isn't. It isn't, because the world is not equal. You and I are workers. Your wife's a worker. Everybody in your family works. They don't have the kind of work ethic. The work ethic they have in the Middle East.
Who is they, by the way?
It's ISIS and the mean groups.
Who is ISIS?
Killers.
Who?
ISIS is.
Do you believe ISIS, the people who are in ISIS, are not educated?
I believe that there are educated, the ones that are leading sometimes.
But why would they do that if they're educated and they can have a good job? And
Power.
most of them.
Power.
Well, the thing is, they have the power. They don't need to kill people for power.
But they don't know that.
Well, they know they're not that. They're not stupid. There's a problem, and you mentioned it earlier before the program. And they feel, most people in this country and around the world, because they're working 2 and 3 jobs for their basic needs, are frustrated, are they not?
Yes, but the other thing, and I'm guilty myself, if I see a car that suits me better than the old rattletrap that I've driven for years, I'm going to strive to get that car. We have, and you said greed, the word greed.
Whoa, I didn't say, Dennis said greed. But you're going to strive to get the car. But the reality is your basic needs are met. You want the car, you don't need the car. But how about if you couldn't afford food and you couldn't afford your shelter? Forget about the car. Your basic needs would not be met. So you'd have to work, let's say, 16 hours to get those basic needs met, wouldn't you?
Yes, and I would.
But wouldn't that be, and if you could get your basic needs met, then on top of that, your car breaks down because you really can't afford the car. So now you can't get to work. Like the guy next door who was working here, his car broke down and he wants to work. He's a hard worker. People want to hire him, but he can't get to work because his car broke down. Now, isn't that a form of frustration? And then of course, if he went down and out and he couldn't eat because we couldn't get his car fixed for some reason, and ISIS realized he's a really good worker, they may say, we'll give you $50,000 a year. The system's really screwing you. You work for us. Now, and ISIS takes the money. They figured out how to manipulate the system to get money out of the system through oil. And as Dennis said, through oil. And that's not greed, by the way. Greed is an emotion. And I keep on fighting with Dennis about this word greed. It's an emotion because if I have $1 or $2 more than somebody else and they can't afford what I can afford, I'm more greedy than they are. So greed is an emotion. And I believe that every human being in the world has to have their basic needs met, no matter what I do. And that's my function, is to make sure they have their food, mainly education, food and shelter. And that can be measured in energy units. And that's why we talk about the human renewable energy measure.
Well, the education to me is super important because I watched my mother go to school for 12 years to get her degree to be a teacher. And we did without, and she did without. But we made it. And so all I can say is your parenting, it starts maybe with parenting.
But that was before, when education was pretty much free. You went to school at night, you can do, and now a kid goes to get a school, let's say a master's degree, they're into $50,000 to $100,000.
Well,
and they got to pay a loan for that.
Right, and now also look at what the equipment you have that helps you do this show.
Right, we talk about that because
millions.
You could do because of technology. Yeah. It allowed me to be a professor in front of 6,000 people a day.
Yes.
And it allows other people to learn if they choose to. They don't have to. Now, so there's a lot of people who don't understand what I'm saying. They just can't understand what I'm saying. And there are a lot of people who are very, very educated who don't want to understand what we're saying.
Well, there are some people that wouldn't even give us the time of day.
Well, that's okay, yeah, but we can't have no control over that. Now, if I have to say I want to start killing people who kill us without understanding why they want to kill us, I become just as psychopathic as they are.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so we don't want to kill people. We have to first understand why you have a group like ISIS. What motivates? So Susan's out there. She's actually sitting maybe 10 feet away. But anyway,
it's a lack of resources, a lack of education.
Frustration. Now, education. Now, let me get back to this education thing. Right now, if I go to my doctor, I'm probably going to pay him $1,000 an hour. Now, the dollar value has no real value to it. And I really need someone to hook up my septic system. Now, then I need someone to dig the trench to hook up the septic system. The guy who digs the trench is just as valuable as my doctor.
I agree.
So now he should have his basic needs met not as wants now. His wants will be different. Like you want a new car. I may want a new septic system or a new sewer line. I may want a new shop, or I may want a new whatever, a new boat or whatever. Those are wants, they're not needs. My needs are fulfilled for a minimal amount of my life work because of technology and because I'm a white male in the United States. If I were a white female in the United States, I wouldn't have the ability, because of the ways the emotional things are that a male had. And if I was a black female in the United States, I'd have it even worse. And if I was an immigrant in the United States, depending upon the mood of the country or the way the system's working, I'd have even less. So greed is not, Dennis, when you say greed, it's an emotion. It's not anything measurable. And I think without something measurable, we are just spitting into the wind. Hate, lust, how much do you love? I'll ask Annie, how much do you love your dog more than you love your child?
Oh, I love my children.
Well, how much?
Oh, much more than the dog.
How much more?
Lots more.
How much is lots more?
I would die for my children. I'm not so sure I would die for this
Okay,
precious
how much
dog.
do you love your country that you would die for your country? Now, if the country was killing your kids,
Yes.
and they were you saw them slowly dying, or
Yeah.
your kids saw you slowly dying, wouldn't they join a group to stop it?
But that group needs to publicize their reasons
But that
for
you
doing
can't
what
get
they
on
do.
mainstream media to publicize it. The frustration takes effect, and you have a thing called ISIS or terrorism. But the true terrorism, I believe, this is my personal stupid belief, is economic terrorism worldwide. And the people who are terrorists are fighting back for economic terrorism against the actual system that we're all part of. I wake up in the morning and I say, I'm getting older and I'm going to kill 2 people today, not because I want to, because of my economic system is forcing me to do so. I have to buy the cheapest equipment I can get because I can't afford the best. So we inundate other countries. We take their natural resources and mainly their labor, and we make them work 16, 18, 20 hours a day just for their basic needs met. And that, my friends, I believe, in my opinion, is wrong. I believe we can't keep doing that. I believe everybody should work. I believe there should be never such a thing as welfare. There should never be a minimum wage, but all basic needs must be met for 1 hour of your work life a day. That's so simple. I don't know how much simpler I can make it, but that's the way I'm saying. And once we do that, then we change the basic, the complexion of the economic system. And then I think that would stop terrorism. And it's not greed, because if I'm working harder, then I want to work harder than you. If I'm working harder than you and I'm cutting more wood than you, and you're only cutting a little bit of wood, does that make me greedy because I like to cut wood?
No. If you're working harder than me, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if what you're doing is hurting other people.
Well, hold on. I'm cutting up we live in a community, let's say we have 2 acres of trees, right?
Right.
And you're cutting down 1/10 of an acre because you're lazy. And I'm cutting down 1 acre and a quarter, right? I got a lot more. And all of a sudden, the weather gets really cold. And I got plenty of wood, more than I can ever need. And you're going to freeze to death. Am I greedy?
No.
Well, I certainly am. I'm allowing you to freeze to death because I worked harder and cut the wood down, and you didn't work. Now I cut the wood down, the natural resources down, using my brain, chainsaws, whatever we had. So we got to figure out the measurement of how many cords of wood I can grab, because I'm very ambitious, and put back, so you, Dennis, who aren't quite as ambitious or don't have a better chainsaw, would at least get your basic warmth so you don't die. Your needs. And that's where we can measure these things in energy units and make sure I put back some of my cords of wood that I enjoyed cutting back to you. And otherwise, if I don't put it back to you and you die because I cut more wood than you, I would be I'd become very greedy. And then if your wife saw me let you die because of cold and she lived, she would become a terrorist and try to kill me because I am taking away from you your basic needs. And I can understand that. And once we understand that basic needs are not being met around the world, in most cases, and people who are educated, like the Pope, by the way, the Pope sees this very well. We need to have all basic needs met. And once we can put the measure, and we can't do it without this measurement. That's the amazing part about this. By the way, we can't be, we're using subjective measurements rather than objective measurements. Like if I told you today it's 250 degrees, Dennis, what would you tell me?
I'd say you're wrong.
How do you know I'm wrong?
Well, if you said you were like, you moved over to the sun or something, that's different.
No, I'm right here in Florida. I'm 250 degree temperatures. Would you believe that?
Well, only if you have to.
Would you believe that if I told you it's 250 degrees, would you believe it?
If you said degrees Celsius, I'd say that you're wrong.
Okay, degrees Celsius, because I'd burn up. Because we all agree upon that measurement. We know that if 100 degrees is boiling, and 212 in Fahrenheit is boiling, and 0 in Fahrenheit in Celsius is freezing, we all agree on those measurements. We all have to agree, just a social agreement, that we all agree that every human being has to have their basic needs met with 1 million energy units of food, 1 million energy units of water, shelter, and a certain amount of energy units for the area you're in that can be understood and agreed upon. And it also, education should be wide open. So I'm going to suggest something. I'm going to say that all education is always available to everyone at zero cost, as much as they can get for nothing. That's a communistic viewpoint.
Just like Cuba.
Just like Cuba. Now I'm going to say the second thing. We all have to agree on a social idea that all humanity has to have their basic needs met. And we all have to agree with that measurement in basic needs met, not subjective, objective measurements. And then I must say that after 1 hour of labor, whatever we have to redefine labor, but right now we're going to not get into that detail, then you allow the free market to take effect. I'm going to bust my chops. I'm ambitious. I want to do more than the average person. I may be a little stupider, a little smarter than the average person. However, I'm going to do the best I can, and I'm going to have more than someone else. That doesn't make me greedy. It makes me ambitious. And no human being will starve because of my ambition. Every human being in the world, would have their basic needs met, so we're not hurting anybody. We've just changed the economic system for the betterment. That means you have a functional government now because we know what the measurement is. Now, by the way, this is also brought to you by the Human Renewable Energy Measure, and we also sponsor Renew the Earth. And Renew the Earth is a nonprofit group that we try to talk about positive things from around the world. That's where we're at. And let me just see what. So, Dennis, what do you now? Without getting back to the greed argument, what do you think now?
No, this is not about greed. I really want to renew the earth, really save our planet. And my question is, there's at least 200 countries in this planet. I am so happy that we're going back on good terms with Cuba. My question is, what countries in this world have done the best job in going in that direction, whether it's Cuba or, maybe in Europe, the northern part of Europe, where you have countries up there that have done some good work. What countries do you think in the world are doing a better job than capitalist countries?
Well, let me just define what you're saying. You're saying on our planet that you want to save the planet, but you're really not saying that. You want to save humanity because the planet's going to be here no matter what, right?
Well, my definition of planet is different. It's like saying save your home. And I'm just saying so that your home is habitable. I understand the home would still be standing there.
Right. So I want to clarify things. So, I mean, if we, as our species, we may kill our species because if we kill our air and our water and our soil, we now have killed our life support. Now, you mentioned your home. And I'm saying to you, on this planet, let's look at it as a big, huge mansion floating in outer space. And there's 200 rooms in it that we divided. Man divided them. The planet's always been the same. It doesn't really matter. We put up these phony border lines. And by the way, when you want to control through the economic system, when you want to control anything like the economic system has done, the first thing you do when you neaten up a building or a house or your garage is you take things and you say, this will go on this side of the garage, this will go on this side of the garage, this will go on this side of the garage. Then you go to each little pile you put in and you divide that up. And that's how you conquer your mess. Well, that's exactly what the economic system is doing to humanity. They divided this planet into about 200 countries. And they now say, that country, we're going to bomb them. But that's like bombing your own house. You're killing your own species. We have to stop doing that. So I want to bring that out, that and the question you asked is which one's doing the best job? Well, none of them are doing a good job. We're still in competition with each other. Cuba, make sure that Cuba, by the way, is a poverty-stricken nation, but their education rate is almost 99%. They're very literate people. Their life expectancy, by the way, is much higher than ours. Really? Much higher than ours. The mortality rate is higher than ours, and this is in Cuba, and they have no drugs, by the way. So in Cuba, in case you're interested, Cuba is doing a really great job, but the problem is the PR, the way that taught. They want to get out of Cuba. There's a problem with Cuba because if I talk against my government in Cuba, I'd be in a jail or dead somewhere. Yeah. The problem is because with the way the regime works, they're so afraid that there are people who want to leave, which they want to leave because they want to make more money. Why? Because of the propaganda that you will be happier if you have more money. Well, that's not true. I know multimillionaires who are miserable. They have their basic needs more than that, and they don't have to deal. The difference between people with a lot of money and people with very little money or some money, they have to deal with the annoyances of life, getting on the phone and spending hours through the system to get through. A wealthy person take care of that for me. They have a car accident. They don't deal with it. Their chauffeur takes care of it. They don't deal with any of this crap. They don't have to raise money. Let someone else deal with it. They have the free time for their 70 or 80 years of life they have. So we all live about the same amount of life, 80 years of life. We all use about 2 million calories of food and water a year. And we all need to have the education, and we all need shelter. Anything above the basic needs, that's where wealthy persons make out really well because they have really free time. And what they do at that time, like we heard Susan and I were talking about Melinda Gates today, and she was in Africa and she was talking about women, and she says, well, all the women there have to do all the chores, which takes 12, 14 hours a day, and then they have no light to read by, so they have a little light they put in their forehead and they study by that, where the men can study all day long during the real daylight. And her conclusion is that we have to do something about this, but it wasn't a normal conclusion. The problem is the economic system is all screwed up in Africa. Not that they don't have light. They can easily get light. We have to change the system so you don't have to work 16 hours a day to get water. And the women shouldn't be affected by there's so much natural resources out there and technology. There should be nobody having to do this kind of work. So this is the part I'm looking at. And I think the way you fix this, don't be bitching about it. The way you fix it is all you got to do. You don't have to pick up a gun. You don't have to vote for the right person. You just got to get in your community the economic system changed. And the way you change it is with a simple measurement that we all agree that all humanity has to have their basic needs met for 1 hour of labor a day. And that's measured in energy units. And then someone else told me yesterday, who was telling, I think it was my friend Gene. and they did eye recognition, retina scanning, and whatever else they had, chips. So every human being in that part of the world was able to get their rations for the day, their basic needs met. Then they had the rest of the day, and it was scanned. So you can walk into a store and you put your thumb down or your eyeball or whatever, and you've got your calories for that day and food and shelter. It's done automatically for your 1 hour a day work. There's no welfare. You got it. And you can't take it away. It can't be manipulated. Your basic needs met. Then you had the 2 extra hours you had that day to work more, and you worked basically under the table. You got paid, and if you got paid so much, you declared that, and you paid so much in taxes, so the people who had the basic needs would get them. You could figure it out simply. It's a beginning. The Pope has been talking about it. Every politician in the world we have to raise the minimum wage. Well, without raising the minimum wage based on energy, you're going to create inflation. True, but inflation is going to make you work harder and make it better for the wealthy. So right now we got more anyway. And if you listen to Bernie Sanders, he's sort of in the right spot, even though now he's saying we have to go get those ISIS no matter where they are. But what you got to ask yourself, what's creating the problem? So I'm going to ask you again, Dennis, what do you think is creating the problem that's creating terrorism?
I think it's the oil under the ground where they live. But first, I want to ask Amy.
Annie.
Annie. I see her puppy on TV on the screen.
He's watching now on television.
Puppy. He's a nice puppy, and he had his arm was rising up too. So it sounded like he was raising his hand, saying, "I want to answer that."
She
question.
does. You know, I have to remind you, all of us here, that's why communes were started years ago, like the Koreans over in Lee County. But it didn't work most of the time because there were always shirkers, and there was always someone who wanted to be the supreme boss of the commune. And so many communes failed because of it just didn't work at that time. Perhaps now it would.
Well, there's something when you say communes. There's no way of measuring. See, that's how. Do you know how the economic system got started?
Probably, if you remind me, I'll remember. I hope.
Well, it actually started out where we had communities. 5,000 years ago, before pharaohs, before kingdoms, way before, and mankind was. They really struggled to keep alive. And there were the shirkers you talked about. Mm-hmm. They were normally the bigger guys who were thugs. They see you, so they were so big that you gave them some food because they protected you. And then all of a sudden we figured out the people who worked and the people who were ambitious figured out a way that if we plow the right way and we put the right seeds in, we can really grow a lot of abundance of food. And the thugs went ahead and they sort of helped them with the heavy stuff, but they didn't do much. So little groups of people who work together, I'm simplifying this, little groups of people who work together had a tremendous amount of abundance. And there are people who didn't quite have the technology, lived in different parts of the areas. And they said, well, we better protect our abundance. So the guys who were the big thugs, we said, look, you protect us. Your job is going to be, we're going to give you a job, protect us so our abundance isn't taken away. So the thug said, oh, I can do that, but there's so many of them, I'll need an army. We'll give you a couple of guys to protect you with bats. And we're going to call you a king. You're the king. You're in charge. And you got an army. And for years, we had abundance. And the army got fed, kings got fed. And then one year, we didn't have abundance. And if the king, he sent his army down not to protect us from them, to take our stuff. Didn't like it. Make us into slaves. You got to keep working to give my army food. Then the kingdoms would fight. And all these kingdoms are fighting. One of the thugs got smart after a while. He said, You know, we can't be fighting amongst ourselves. We're the kings. Let's unite and call ourselves the United Kingdom. You've heard of that.
Of course.
And then we said we need to, and as time progressed, you know, thousands and thousands of years progressed, you had kings, and then you had England, United Kingdom. Then they didn't like that word United Kingdom. It sounded really too close to the whole, too close to truth.
To the truth.
So they said, well, we're going to call ourselves Great Britain. And that sounded a little too much too, because that's where Greenwich Mean Time comes in, because they wanted all the ships to come in at a certain time for commerce to make more money. And then you got involved with, well, we'll call ourselves England. But now it's not just Great Britain, it's worldwide, the economic system. And it only serves a small portion of this world population. Some people say 1%, some people say 1.1% or whatever. But it doesn't matter. It matters that the economic system isn't working. And we can spend hours talking about conspiracy theories and hours about how we think things were. I may be wrong, by the way, but I'm always saying there's a caveat there that I do the best I can what I got. So but the reason why you have terrorism is because of the frustration of the media, the frustration of the way you see your kids working many, many jobs. Matter of fact, you have a daughter who's got a great education in the middle of jobs, because why? They closed that place down. Now, if she didn't have a certain amount of economic savings, she'd have a problem. And especially, she's a good-looking white woman. If she, in some cases, if you're black or Hispanic, you don't get those benefits. So let's face up to the fact that it's not so much greed as it is the system, the way it functions.
Well, it's hard to forget that the place was financed in the Bahamas by China, by a businessman from China who was friends and pals with a politician from the Bahamas. And suddenly it failed. Billions of dollars. So there's the greed.
Well, the thing is, but it's the economic system, not the billions of dollars. It's the way the economic system works. Susan, go ahead.
It's based on profit.
Yes.
It's based, right, it's based.
Not on preserving the humanity.
It's not based on physics. Physically, if everyone's needs are met, if everyone's basic needs are met, then you have no problem. The basic needs are met, and once the basic needs are met, then there's no more terrorism. See, that's the point I want to bring out, is that without basic needs being met worldwide, and by the way, if the guy made off with $1 billion, so what? That means the person they closed the place down, the people he displaced, would never have to worry, because their basic needs are met. They had some money in the bank, or they had some living energy units in the bank, so they never ever have to worry about being hurt. Right? They never look for shelter or food or water. It's all there, no matter where you are in the world. Now you got 23 more hours a day. I got to get a better idea of what I can do, and maybe I can come up with an idea that, like, let's suppose we have a hysterical society. We're going to donate a house, and we're going to all work together about 23 more hours a day. Let's work 2 hours a day on this hysterical society. All right, you know.
And that's about what it would take.
And and if we all worked on promoting the human renewable energy measure an hour a day, and we got that measurement into the language, we would change the world. It's that simple. And the way we're doing it is, we opened up a television radio station, and we're asking you, we're almost begging you to please get this message out. The HREM, the Human Renewable Energy Measure. And we don't want your money again. We don't want you to join our group. We don't want you to do anything but understand what we're talking about. By the way, we have a friend of ours working next door, and he's, as I say, one of the hardest workers I've ever met in my life. He just asked me to borrow some lapas. His car broke down. He has no way of getting to work, so someone has to pick him up if they want to work for him. He has no way of getting lunch, so you got to make sure they supply people with lunch. He needed a pair of loppers. But every human being has tremendous value. That person is huge value. If I had to do what he did, I'd be in the hospital because I can't do it any longer. And I'm ambitious. I want to get it done. You could just leave it set. You could let houses fall apart, roads fall apart. And I asked a very wealthy friend of mine, I said, what do you think builds roads? And he said, money. I said, no, money doesn't build roads. Labor builds roads. Money pays the labor, but human beings do the work. And that's important. Human beings use the mind and labor to do it with. But we need to measure this labor somehow. Not a Marxist. People call me a Marxist because I look like Marx. But it's not a Marxist view. It happens to be, what we're talking about is a measurement that I believe in capitalism, but the capitalism can never, ever take its effect where human beings can ever hurt anybody. It has to be set up in such a way where all humanity has their basic needs met. And that's got to be measured in energy units.
Before the profit.
Before any profit is taken out. The profit is in living. I mean, it's profitable to just live, not to make a living, but to live, to enjoy your dog, your kids, the trees, nature, not to destroy it. And as a matter of fact, look, it's interesting. No matter what I look at, there's profit. I looked at the dog, and I used to love German Shepherds. So because of money, people used to breed shepherds, breed dogs, breed animals to get the best out of it, to make money. Not years ago, they bred the animal because they liked to breed the animal for a certain way, hunting or whatever they bred the animal for. But now they breed, but it's meant for profit. And as a matter of fact, I have arguments with people who talk about GMOs, genetically modified organisms. Well, there's nothing wrong with GMOs, but they're built to make profit. You take the profit out of GMOs and make it to benefit humanity rather than make a profit. We could probably use great GMOs, technology, computers, cars that steer themselves, cars that have technology in it that can't have accidents, or very, very difficult to have an accident. Accidents are created because people don't see things, or they have their reflexes are out, or the stop sign or traffic light didn't work. That can be eliminated with technology. Eliminated. It can be, airplanes can fly themselves. You don't need pilots. But people, what about the jobs? No, human beings we can build robots to do almost anything and give us free time. But all humanity has to benefit from the free time, not just a few. I mean, people in Africa who were working 16 hours a day just to get their basic needs, water and food and shelter, get wood together to make a fire. There's so much natural resource that no human being should have to work that hard. No matter where they are in the world. Basic needs must be met for about an hour a day of labor, according to people who theoretically measure these things. And once we can do that, we stop the terrorism. And it's not a question of greed, it's a question of the way the economic system works. Dennis, does that make sense to you?
Oh, yes, it makes sense to me. I was even looking at Annie's puppy, nodded his head yes. It makes sense to him, too.
This little dog has had a very positive influence on a lot of people. She's here to make everybody happy. She does her work. If she doesn't want profit, just a little bit of food and a little bit of warmth when Florida gets down in the 40s, which it does, and that's all she asks of life.
Well, that's amazing, because that's the interesting part about this is squirrels, birds, animals, all of the living things don't look for profit. Only humanity looks for profit, looks to get something above and beyond. And they never did, by the way. The old days, and when I say the old days, I'm not going back 100 years or 200 years, but 1,000 years. 5,000 years ago, humanity did not work in competition. They worked in cooperation. And that's what made humanity grow up to about 5,000 years ago. And then, of course, the way the system worked, you need more and more people to be slaves or work. And it's no longer black slaves or Asian slaves, or it's all poor people as slaves to the very wealthy people. And we're not saying that's even bad. We're saying that's the way it is. How do we get that? And that's why you have terrorism, by the way. Economic systems, economic terrorism, which Dennis, you were talking about, that creates dictators, that creates more terrorism economically, creates physical terrorism to change the way the economic system works. That's all the terrorists about. It's changing the way we do our business. That's all terrorism is. Stop the economic system from killing people around the world. Stop the way, not, I don't want to stop capitalism, but the way we handle capitalism. We need a combination of some communism, some socialism, and a lot of capitalism, because human beings, what makes humans humans rather than that dog or the squirrel or the bird, is all wants. All wants are all different, but all human beings are exactly the same as far as their needs go worldwide, but their wants are different. So if your wants make you greedy, as you say, or ambitious, I call that ambition, and you're not hurting anybody, then the word greed disappears and our system works. And I gotta just make sure I don't get too far off on a tangent.
Well,
here.
I could introduce something.
Go ahead,
if you
Sue,
want.
please.
Is my voice coming across?
I don't know.
Because you only have to hear what I'm going to read, not, you don't have to see me, right?
I don't
and
see Susan. but
Can
I
you hear me,
her.
Dennis?
I can hear you very
Oh,
well.
good. And I suggested in our summary that we might even ask Buckminster Fuller's opinion on why he thinks terrorism surfaces, and it turns out that what I found really was not a quote from Buckminster Fuller, but from John Steinbeck in his book, The Log from the Sea of Cortez. And actually, I borrowed this book from Annie, so thank you, Annie. I'm marking it up. I hope you don't mind. But he and his buddies, they went to the Sea of Cortez, which is south of California. There's a beautiful Gulf in there, where there were, at the time when he did this, I think around the 60s, there was abundance of incredible marine life, and they would wait for the tides to pull out so that they could go in and collect, and then they would preserve what they collected in jars and stuff like that. But oftentimes when, and he was with a biologist who's Ed Ricketts, his friend, and a trained biologist who was running the expedition to get these collections and stuff. And oftentimes when people do this kind of activity, and they're observing other animal life, and the people, we always like to anthropomorphize what we observe. In other words, we like to see if we can draw parallels between the way that other creatures organize their lives and the way that we as humans behave, and it helps us to understand our human behavior sometimes better when we kind of make these kind of comparisons. And here's what John Steinbeck said about this, and then how that can actually evolve into terrorism, essentially. Just this couple of, it's not going to take more than a few minutes to read this quote. "It is difficult when watching the little beasts not to trace human parallels. The greatest danger to a speculative biology is analogy. It is a pitfall to be avoided. The industry of the bee, the economics of the ant, the villainy of the snake, all in human terms have given us profound misconceptions of the animals. But parallels are amusing if they are not taken too seriously as regards the animal in question, and are downright valuable as regards humans. The routine of changing domination is a case in point. One can think of the attached and dominant human who has captured the place, the property, and the security. He dominates his area. To protect it, he has police who know him and who are dependent on him for a living. He is protected by good clothing, good houses, and good food. He is protected even against illness. one would say that he is safe, that he would have many children, and that his seed would in a short time litter the world. But in his fight for dominance, he has pushed out others of his species who are not so fit to dominate, and perhaps these have become wanderers, improperly clothed, ill-fed, having no security and no fixed base. These should really perish, but the reverse seems to be true. The dominant human, in his security, grows soft and fearful. He spends a great part of his time in protecting himself. Far from reproducing rapidly, he has fewer children, and the ones he does have are ill protected inside themselves because so thoroughly protected from without. The lean and hungry grow strong, and the strongest of them are selected out, having nothing to lose and all to gain.
That's your
These
terrorism.
selected, hungry, and rapacious ones develop attack rather than defense techniques and become strong in them, so that one day the dominant man is eliminated and the strong and hungry wanderer takes his place. Unquote. And that's John Steinbeck. And so what we're creating with our forcing of all of the free time and the power and the money to the top 1% or less is we're creating a situation that makes the whole system vulnerable to exactly what John
But
Steinbeck
the key is not to keep
and the
attack.
people.
Now,
but-
here's my point: is that we don't want to attack or kill anybody. We don't ever want to do that. We have to understand the problem we're running into. The problem we're running into is, in fact, we continue fighting and killing one another, and that's not the goal. The goal is to make it so all humanity works in cooperation with each other. Most people who want more should, when they work harder, should have more. We're not saying not. But how much, if I'm making $1 million an hour, how much dollars should I pay? You can only do that subjectively, not objectively. Once we measure it in energy units, just like temperature or gravity or anything else we agree upon, the measurement cannot be manipulated. It's based on science. It can never be changed. So we can figure out a good, legitimate, we can call it a tax structure or a return. If I'm cutting too much wood down because I like to cut wood, how much you should get so you don't freeze to death. How many units of energy I should put in for air conditioning so people have a more comfortable life than dying from heat exhaustion. Food, all this has to be brought out. This is all very, very important things. Annie, we have a few minutes left of the program. Dennis, do you want to go on to anything special within our next few minutes we have?
Oh, no, my main question was, are there any countries besides ours that's doing a good job, like Norway, Sweden, Denmark? What countries are doing a good job?
Every country, right now, I think Sweden, it's either Switzerland or Sweden. I'm sorry, my mind is not as sharp as I'd like it to be. And I don't have paperwork in front of me. Susan, she's better than I am with that. But there's one country that gives everybody a stipend of X amount of dollars for their basic needs met. I think it's $25,000 the minute you're born. Every year you get 15 or 24, whatever it takes to live, you got that. I think that's Switzerland's trying that experiment, but we can't do it on an individual country because the country itself, the world's got to agree to that. Cuba, make sure all education for all humanity, for all of their constituents is free. And that way you have great literacy rates. They have a 99 or almost a 99% literacy rate in that country. No one in Cuba goes hungry. That's amazing. They're not obese. They have free time. There's music that plays. There's artwork that gets done. Reasonably good, but you can't say anything against their government because the freedom of speech is gone. but there's a reason for that. But if we all worked in cooperation, now we're going over to Cuba and we're going to bring in we're going to open up the country to exploit them. Now, we found out that in Cuba, there's right off the coast, there's cobalt for our batteries, there's oil to get oil out of Cuba close by, natural resource, and of course labor. And we're gonna brainwash them to say you got to work harder and harder. I think the quality of life in Cuba will go down, not up. Their monetary rate may go up, but their quality of life will go down. It's my personal opinion. I've been to Cuba and I've seen it on first hand.
I lived in New Zealand for a year, and they have a program there for people that really need help, and they will give them farmland, their own farmland, for apples or pears, and they will provide the beginning equipment for them, sprays, whatever. And I met a family that were living actually in a house made of packing crates, in a little half of a trailer.
How long ago was that?
18 years. And they were doing well. They were working hard, and we went to help them because we were just there. Our boat was tied up being repaired, and we went to help them. And they were so nice and so grateful to the country and to us.
New Zealand, we were there.
Well, actually, they're considering something now that it will be a living stipend for every citizen of New Zealand. It's actually going to be voted on, so that is exactly basic needs met stipend for every citizen.
But we need to get
4 million, only 4 million.
Yes,
people.
it's an island,
and it's also beautiful.
On an island, you can do something like that.
We need to get
just like
Cuba,
Cuba,
to get that concept.
they were able to contain a certain amount of philosophy within it, because it's an island, and you can experiment in this way, and New Zealand is that's extraordinary that they're going to do that, and or at least considering doing that.
And Australia has a program where they give parents money as long as their children are going to school. It's not a lot of money, but it's a monthly amount.
So that they
my
can
son-in-law's
absorb.
from Australia, and I probably should get the figures from him, but
Right.
they do give money to the parents while the children are in school.
Right.
Well, the thing is,
Right.
it's money. The thing is, you don't know how much money.
Well,
It isn't much, but it helps.
Yeah.
I remember
But
that.
in New Zealand, they're doing it because they can, as you say, it's an island, and they have a certain population that they're aware of how much all of the expense would be to provide basic needs, and then let people. I mean, it's incredible, but this can be done worldwide.
Oh.
But it's easier to calculate on an island, of course, because you've got a limited population. But people are thinking along these lines.
Anyway, we are
That's
now.
a good thing.
I want to thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Annie.
Eddie,
And Dennis.
it's Dennis. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. We'll be back again on Sunday
You're welcome.
on World Call In, and we'll be back and talk about again.
Because they closed the
Renewable
factory,
energy.
rise to a
We're still on. We're still.
Never quite enough. Energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone. Well, here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy. Fossil fuel affects our lives like ripples on a lake. Cars and farms and factories and trucks. Supplies go down and prices soar, our futures are at stake. And when it's gone, it won't come back, and we'll be out of luck. Oh, energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone. Here's some fuel for thought. It all comes down to energy. We can get our energy from corn and grass and trees, even trash and dirt to biofuels. Break loose from the stranglehold of oil companies. Renewables can fuel the world. We're here to spread the news of energy, energy. It all comes down to energy. You wonder where the money's gone, listen to the thought. It all comes down to energy.